No, of course, this was simply the show effect of linking what we had been talking about, moral, historical moral elements, social standards, to the break, but this is part of it. We don't have had the right for a break. It is something that developed. It is as well about punctuality, coming a minute or 2 or 3 late, and actually expecting others to wait or to get disturbed. It is a certain way of respect and of respecting both sides. And it is a certain way of playing around with what is given, meaning the air condition. It is there, and it actually works, and somebody tried actually to get it working. In some classrooms we have it, but it doesn't work. And it is very much about, as well, what do we need to perform. And you find a huge and hugely important contradiction here. We will come back to this later. That on the one hand, what you need to perform is something you want, that you can use as well, let's say, for general life, that you enjoy there. And to some extent, it is something that is simply there as a matter of functioning. And sometimes the best way to show the contradiction is to show the ridiculous or not so ridiculous examples, use them. Of course, today, in most of the jobs, we have to be able to read and to write. There are only few jobs where you can say, I don't have to read at all. Actually, the most crucial point, beginning, actually, where you need to know how to read and write, is if you read the contract, the labor contract, and you sign it. You have to know what you sign. You should know what you sign. And you have to show that you had been reading it by your signature. And as I said, it sounds like, I wouldn't say ridiculous, but it sounds like something we don't have to consider in reality. But then if you look at certain researchers, you see people who are not able, illiterate people, and they manage sometimes. Sometimes it means the complete failure, and sometimes they are kind of clever. They don't need really this ability to work, and then they come to sign the contract. Then they look at it and, oh, I have the wrong glasses with me. Or they just pretend, I read it, but actually I have something with my hand today, I cannot write. This is reality for some. You find a way to work around it. In some cases you can do it, in most of the cases we cannot do it, at least when it comes to certain basic skills, basic social skills. And now comes the point, of course, if I can read and write, this cannot be limited to what I need to do the job. I can read something else as well. And sometimes you find a little bit, I don't know how it's called, it's not a cartoon, but cartoon-like photography. When you go back in history, women had not been allowed to go to school to get higher education. And then you find a woman reading a book. Reading is dangerous. Because of course it was dangerous for many people. Women could read. They could read about their rights or potential rights. I mentioned this one book, the Rights of Men, and then there was the Rights of Women. More or less published at the same time. So it was about literacy, it was about knowing. And this is also something you cannot avoid. There is this moral element, social standards, historical standards. Today, we can use telephones, WeChat, and all these social media. And of course, we need this ability, and at the same time, it can be in certain ways, it can be something our employer actually doesn't want us to know. And it is very much changing, and it is very much as well a matter of claiming rights. This is what is possible today, and this is what we want to avail of. This is what we want to avail of a right, because not only it increases our functionality, but it as well, it is something we simply like. As said, it is based on this thing. Capital is depreciated, labor is appreciated. So we are appreciated as laborer because we can do this work not only in terms of concrete work, but as well in terms of abstract work. It is part of this entire process that starts nowadays with with money, aiming on having more money at the end. And where we have this huge problem, actually, that on the one hand, in general terms, this moves towards lowering the variable capital, lowering the amount of work that is needed. So we replace V by C, we replace work, labor, by machines, and to some extent it works. It is replaceable. To some extent it doesn't. So we have to look at the concrete dimension as well. We can, of course, the most exciting example is machine translation. We can use machine translation and the computer translates things. And I got actually an email in the morning, somebody using a phrase and saying, actually, I hope it is, or this is what a website told me it would mean. And I wrote back, I don't have a clue what this is about. And it was just a phrase. He got from a website, from a machine translation. It didn't make any sense. To some extent, you can translate, you can use them. To some extent, they are simply translating rubbish. Literally translating things doesn't always work out. And to some extent, it simply is as well the form. In Italian, in French, in German, I don't know, actually in Chinese, we have this way of addressing somebody formally. So in French it is the vous, it's the formal way of addressing some superior, or the Sie in English, in German. And then you have the tu, du for the informal amongst friends. The machine doesn't know it. If you key in, can you give me, it can mean, kannst du mir geben, can you in personal form, or können Sie mir in the formal way. Pouvez-vous. Allora, so we can do it to some extent. In some extent, it is not possible at all. To some extent, it is problematic. And to some extent, we see it simply in the quality. Handcrafted work is simply, in most of the cases, better if it's a good, qualified craftsman than the work done by a machine. It's my permanent problem if I buy a shirt or a jacket, basically I can leave them there and say, can you fix the buttons again? Because they are loose. Machine, they don't do it properly. At the same time, we reduce labor, we reduce this, but at the same time it means that part of the overall production process that actually creates value is getting smaller. It is difficult to understand because, of course, we get more, at least this is what we see, we get more value out of it in some way. Because the machine does it for us. At the same time, the creative part, that part that really generates value, is getting lower, is getting smaller. So, in short, we talked about it, the profit is increasing, but the profit rate is decreasing. We invest, at the end of the day, we get more out of it, but in relative terms, the rate, in relative terms, we get less. It doesn't really make sense first glance impression, because we see these huge amounts of profit that are generated. But this is, as I said, it's the profit and not the profit rate. Which means you have to invest huge amounts of money to get this return. Now we come to another dimension of this historical social societal historical moral element. It is the claims we have, the claims we develop. And one, though a little bit problematic dimension of it, is usually referred to the hierarchy of needs and wants, linked to Maslow, the pyramid. And basically he has this hierarchy and he says there are the physiological needs. This is what we need. This is not really relevant in terms of historical or due to historical changes. We all have to breathe. We all need food. We all need water, sex, sleep, homeostasis, and excretion. Basic physical needs. Physiological. Now there is of course a little bit a historical, societal, social element to it, because what is food? If you look at what we eat today, this is much more refined than it had been 20 years ago and than it had been 50 years ago and 100 years ago. Mind, this is about food and not the ready-made meal you get in the restaurants prepared by the best chef of the world, but it's simply what you need. Water, of course, it means clean water, and it may be not just clean water, but it is bottled water, and it is actually not water, but it's something else to drink. Basic physiological need, safety. Security of the body, employment, resources, morality, the family, health, property. Morality, the family, is again something where you can say, well, what does it really mean? If you look at China, we find here a huge change of the meaning of families. On the one hand, you have one child policy, so it's small family. At the same time, Spring Festival is coming up. You will get aware again of what your family is. There are aunts and there are uncles and there are cousins and there are I don't know what, who gathers then for the family celebration. So this is the tradition. You still appreciate the large family. Morality is of course hugely, I wouldn't say contestable, but it's not clear what it means. But at least it should mean that you can be safe in terms of there is this moral standard that nobody kills you. At least not voluntarily and intentionally. If it happens you are in the wrong place, in the middle of the road and there's a car coming and ignoring the red traffic light, bad luck. That's not about morality, although you can say there actually we have this moral standard of looking what is going on, of not speed driving and these things. Health is kind of clear. Property is again something, what does it really mean? To some extent it is not contestable, to some extent when it comes to the property of means of production, property of how much, then we can again contest this. Love, belonging as the next step. I won't go through all these, but you can see this kind of the family friendship. Here you have family again. Here you have actually the family and family. I don't know if it was meant to express this, but here it is the family, the core of it, and here it's the larger understanding. Family, there is of course this link to friendship, and it's a kind of larger reliability of friends. It's not just other people, but it is of friends who kind of come near to the family. Then you have esteem, self-actualization. As I said, it is always a little bit problematic, and you find many discussions, many contributions to this hierarchy. Because, of course, it is not really strictly a hierarchy. It is useful to use it as a heuristic tool, but respect by others, morality, there is a very close link, and you can ask, should respect really less important or the same level as this? Confidence, security, there is as well something where you can say it is actually on the same level. But in general, I think it is a useful tool to think that not everything is on the same level and not everything should be considered as need. At the same time, there is this moral dimension in terms of historical moral elements that we move in two ways up on this scale. In simple ways, saying the food is getting better. So it's not just the basic food to survive, but it is getting better. And as well, we can say, this is something you see in China, and you see when you are traveling actually to Europe then, that the basic needs are by and large covered. When I arrived in Europe, in Budapest, I thought there is nothing like basic needs being covered. You see a huge amount of people sleeping rough. And then I thought, first impression, right, this is Hungary. It is one of the hugely problematic countries. Then I came to Austria, and actually to one of the cities, towns in Austria that is reasonably wealthy. And I did not see as many homeless people sleeping rough in that place, but I saw quite a lot of people sleeping rough there as well. So you find something where we can still say, basically, we have this move upwards, that the worries about the basic physiological needs are not as important as they are or as they had been. Basic need of knowledge, of education, even if we don't see necessarily that it is a basic need, and we ignore it, but it is something we should consider, because at some stage it is about what we actually need to survive, to get a job, to get an appropriate job. Another part of the discussion is actually, is it really this one direction we move? Or is there a counter movement that we, for instance, in Europe, in many cases, we go down again on this scale? people are worrying again more and more about food and covering their basic needs. Because it is so important, again this part, and you can see it is as well about what is actually valued then. Work does not equal labor. And this means that you can apply all this in a different way as well when it comes to the determination of value that is not linked to human activity, to human work. Because what you have, if you have a machine, or if you have this pen, or not this pen, a pen, there's something amazing that we usually don't consider. Why don't we consider it, or what happens actually not considering certain things? Moral standards, moral historical standards. I rushed, actually I managed, this is, you get trained to this if you are traveling quite a lot. I managed to go to an exhibition, to a guided tour in a gallery. And actually I knew the person from previous tours. And she was talking about French arts. And she said, I lived in France for a while. And it was so great to see or to have this experience of the importance of certain work we usually don't consider being important. So I lived in a pretty wealthy area. All these rich people going around and looking at certain people, they are not really worthy. It was about those people who collect the waste. And she said, and they had been on strike for 2 weeks. And then you could see the value of the work they do. Because people had been stepping there and looking for a clean place where to walk. And this is as well something, standards of a clean environment are changing. I don't know how many 100 years things have been just thrown away out of the window. There was no waste disposal. Now it is collected. And there is a huge advancement as well in this respect, how it is collected. But now coming to this little pen. There is so much education in this pen. The original, not the original way of writing, this was in stones and this stuff, but we have had the feather. I think it was usually the goose feather that had been used, put into ink. You could write a little bit, put into ink, write a little bit, and you always had to, basically you had to collect the ink from this little thing and could write a line. If you look at a fountain pen today, a good fountain pen, I think they are amazing. It's basically the same. They work according to the same principle. Basically, you collect the ink, but actually you store it in the fountain pen. And I still didn't figure out how it is possible to portion it in some way that it is always the same strength of the line. If you press it in the same way, the same pressure, you will always have the same line for I don't know how many miles. You can write and write and write and write and write. There is no back to the inkpot and take it. It's very clear. And then you have these things. Now writing with a fountain pen is still somewhat not awkward, I like it, but it's not necessarily clean. You have to be careful. With these things, I think it's ball pen called ball pen, you don't have to. It looks more or less the same. They are writing as well very soft. And you can do whatever you want, there is no ink coming out. Only if you write. There's so much intelligence in this little tip there. But this is not educated. But people who had been educated worked on this, invented it, and produced it. So you have the same of the education in it, the existence of it, the physical existence of it. So the value, the determination of the value is very much the same as we talked when it came to the labor power. You have education, you have the simply existence in it. You need the material. You need the education, meaning the qualification of this product. It's not the goose feather, it is something else. And it is this historical moral element. I don't know how it was in China or how it is in China. When I went to school, I don't know if it's the same today, but we had to write, we had to learn to write with a fountain pen. Usually we wrote these with these ball pens or something like this, the barrier, but we had to learn how to write with a fountain pen. There is this, I don't know, cultural element as well. Something you have to get used to. Every product, as I said at some stage, today a car has more electronics in it than the first space shuttle. And then we have this of the marginal rate and profitability, what I mentioned before. There is less living labor in it, but at the same time, we get more output in terms of production gets more profitable in absolute terms, where it is getting less profitable in terms of the profit rate. And then we have technological progress, something we will talk about at a later stage. I'll show you a little film about it. And then we have a different formulation of this contradiction. First formulation, more profit but a lower profit rate. Then you have this contradiction between the productive process and the market needs. The productive process is about creation, generation of value. So you want to produce as much value as possible. And this means, of course, you invest what? Human labor. People who are working and who are doing good work. This is what you do. Attentive students who make their neighbors aware of somebody looking. It's great. And you simply have the other way of not bothering at all, doing the job, which doesn't create value. Not really. You can find different mixtures there. But you still need a lecturer, even if you have a video. At some stage there has to be a lecturer doing the lecture and recording it. You can't do entirely without it. Maybe that the video is better, but it is only as good as the first recording is. Be that as it is, the market need says, fine, yes, we need this value, but we want to reduce the price, which in a way means we reduce the value. Video recording of lectures, machine translation, robots doing the work for us, and robots even enjoying ourselves. I'm hesitating. I read in a newspaper something. There was a guy proudly announcing he played badminton with a robot. So the robot entertains us. If your friends don't have time, you just ask your robot if he joins you for a badminton game. So I don't know if the robot enjoys this, but at least you can enjoy playing badminton. So it's reduction of human labor, and it makes things cheaper. Pay for your private badminton trainer. You will pay quite a lot of money. A robot, you pay for half an hour or something, insert coins, probably relatively cheap. The same, as I said, certain products, they are lowered in terms of their value, but they still do the job and you still get something out of it. In terms of the producer, what do I have to do? I produce as cheap as possible, because then people can buy it. Or I still produce the high-end products, expensive. I won't sell many, but I can get a huge amount of money for it. So there is this tension between massification, produce as much as possible from the one product, and that does the job. That allows you to sell many, many products. Per item you won't get much. You cannot sell these things, these pens, for much money. That's mass product. If you have a handcrafted fountain pen, that may be really handcrafted and arts and the nib is beautifully handmade, you will pay quite a lot. And then there is this scarcity-fication, I said, to artificially reduce the availability of products. To say it is a mass product, but actually I will only offer on the market, instead of the 20 million needed or wanted, I will only produce 10 million. So you make things scarce that people then pay again more because there is competition. This is a different expression of what I mentioned before, of this contradiction that is around the profit rate. The one thing is you want to make profit, meaning you want to have as much, simplified, as much money as possible after going through this process of production. And you are simply interested in the absolute amount. But at the same time, you are actually interested in more. How much do I have to invest to get this amount? And this is the profit rate. And this is the contradiction that then is there between the two dimensions of the process of production. I said production is the manufacturing of things, the consumption as a productive process, the distribution, and the exchange. And here we are talking about the production of something at the one extreme, at the one end, requiring good work, concrete work, and here I have the market needs, basically being happy when things can be sold. And this requires to lower the price, to sell things as cheap as possible. So there is a contradiction. Whenever you go to an enterprise, whenever you invest into something, you will have exactly this problem. And of course, we are working here on the market. We have to sell things, and this is what we have to do first and foremost. This is what we have to have in mind when we invest. Can we sell, and for which price can we sell the products? So we'll talk about this then during the next session.